and then hit go live. Hello, we're live. Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome back to We Are Careers. Very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. This Wednesday lunchtime, a little bit grey, certainly where I am in the world, but hopefully you're all having kind of a pleasant sort of run in to the Christmas period. So this is We Are Careers. This is your fortnightly CPD snippet for careers professionals in the UK and beyond, covering all of the latest topics that are affecting career development professionals and the clients that we work with. So very, very warm welcome. This is actually our final episode of 2023. Can you believe it? But if you're joining us for the first time, again, a very warm welcome. My name is Chris Webb. I'm a higher education careers professional and RCDP with the Career Development Institute. And I'm joined, as always, by my fantastic co-host, Meet Sabiha. So, Sabiha, can you believe it? It is the final We Are Careers of 2023. How has that happened?
I don't know, honestly. I cannot believe, and I'm just giggling to myself because every time I get put in charge of kind of kickstarting the show, I always somehow manage to find a way to sort of kind of either lose the counter or go live. So I just love it. So I cannot believe that we are already at the end of 2023. So thank you, folks, for joining us today. We've got a phenomenal guest that's going to kind of help us go out with a bang today. So if you haven't already, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to have you here. You know, if you're perhaps joining us for the very first time, welcome. It's great to see some unfamiliar faces. And there will be a chat box, comments feature on whatever platform that you're watching us on. So make sure that you join in today's conversation, because what are we going to be talking about today? So today we're going to be talking about and exploring the topic and theme, how can careers professionals stay up to date with emerging trends in the business world? Now, this is a topic we'll be discussing with today's guest, Thomas, an economist, an economic analyst with the Northeast Local Enterprise Partnership. And we do always ask at the beginning of the show, if you're liking what we're creating, if you're enjoying the guests that we are bringing to you, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us, and those algorithms on the platforms allow us to then sort of kind of promote and get this show out there to a much wider audience. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm known as Meet Sabiha, and I work in the international career space where I work with motivated professionals to get unstuck and get back to career flow without the stress. And I'm also the creator of the I Am Thriving Career Coaching Program, where I teach coaches how they can help enhance the career interaction that they have with their clients that results in more transformative coaching practices. Now, it's that part of the show where we're going to do the careers cheers of the week. And we have got some really great ones, haven't we, Chris? So who and what are we going to be celebrating today?
Yes, thanks, Bit. So no kind of like individual careers cheers as such. So our first one really is just a kind of a plug and sort of a reminder that there are plenty of opportunities still to give someone that you know, or even yourself, a careers cheers over the next kind of 6 months, because the UK Career Development Awards are open once again. So these are the UK CDA that you'll kind of see advertised through the CDI website. You should see on the screen below the link to the page. And again, every year, these are a brilliant opportunity to really kind of raise awareness of colleagues that are doing fantastic work across the career sector, or indeed yourself. Self-noms absolutely encouraged for the UK Career Development Awards. So there's 8 categories in total. People may be familiar with them by now. We have things like Public Sector Careers Coach of the Year, Private Sector Careers Coach of the Year, I think pre-16 and post-16 careers program. There's one that specifically focuses on innovation and technology. There's a research-based award. So 8 awards in total, all of which you can find via the link to the CDI website below. Nominations need to be in by the 31st of January, I believe. So you've got a fair amount of time to kind of get those nominations in, with the award ceremony itself taking place in June 2024. So yeah, it's a really big plug to say, if you know someone who's doing great careers work, fits into one of those categories, or you feel that you yourself are deserving, you may be nominated by someone else, but equally self-noms absolutely encouraged. So do have a look at that, and make someone's 2024, give them a really big career cheers in the form of a nomination for the UK Career Development Award. So that is our first careers cheers of the week. And then our second one is kind of really a reflective careers cheers, which is just to say a massive thank you to everyone that has kind of made We Are Careers happen this year. So that's all of our kind of guests from this season, including Thomas, who's here with us today, but also all of our guests from our previous 2 seasons in 2023. And of course, you, the viewers, for keeping this going, because we need people to watch it, and suggesting topics, putting us in touch with prospective guests, and really just kind of commenting, interacting, making sure that, you know, that this program is still worth including as part of the wider offer across the career development sector. So massive careers cheers to all of you. And those are our 2 big kind of group careers cheers for the week, Sabiha.
Oh, fantastic. And am I right in thinking, Chris, that there's also some activity sort of happening sort of in the Facebook community, I believe? Have I got that right? So if people aren't a member of the CDI Facebook community, we can do, hang on, where is it? We've got interested in becoming a member of the CDI. They can find information right on the website. And then there's also, sorry, I'm just sort of, you can see I'm sort of, as if I've never done this before.
No, I think we just, we always want to plug that, don't we? We always want to encourage people, you know, if they've not yet joined the CDI. And of course, lots of people watching this, you know, may well not be CDI members already. So it's worth mentioning, I guess, for the UK Career Development Awards, I believe that CDI membership is kind of part of that if you're a nominee. But of course, if you're interested in what we're talking about and you maybe want to be involved with the UK Career Development Awards, do check out the information about CDI membership below. Obviously, we are part of the benefits that members have, but there are lots of others that you can find through the website. And Sabiha is going to be mentioning a little bit more about the website in the news section later. So yeah, very, very good reminder on that front too.
I am. Oh, so thank you for that, Chris. And so, as we said, I think, how about everybody else who's joining us right now? Are we ready to get Thomas on and start digging into today's topic and theme? Let me know in the comments if you're ready to hear from our guest today. Because as I say, it's a really great topic and it's something that I know I resonate with, and I'm always sort of, because it kind of interweaves with sort of kind of my work. So Thomas, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for those people who are not aware of the work that you do, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and the work that you do with Northeast Local Enterprise Partnership?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you much for having me on. I always like getting out to talk about economic data and evidence, so it's fantastic to be here. And I really feel like this is a good forum to share some of the findings that we've been doing in our work. So what is the Northeast Local Enterprise Partnership? Well, very simply, it's the public body responsible for promoting economic growth in the northeast of England. And what we're trying to do is drive more and better jobs for residents and deal with some of our economic challenges. How do we do that? Well, we do that through a variety of means. I mean, a lot of it is business support. So we have a business growth hub, which works with businesses to help them scale and grow jobs in the region. But we also have a very active skills team, and their main responsibility is to try and help link education provision in the region to local opportunities. So understand what opportunities are there in the Northeast and how can we develop the right kind of skills amongst our residents to get there. Where I come into that is, so to underpin all those programs of work, we need a strong and robust economic evidence base. And so as the senior economic analyst at the Northeast LEP, it's my responsibility to make sure we have this evidence base that covers all of the strengths and weaknesses in the region that we can use to underpin our programs of delivery.
Thanks, Thomas. I really, really kind of useful introduction. I think it sort of speaks, I guess, to how we met, which was a kind of conference sort of in Newcastle. And I remember sort of at the time, you know, when I kind of saw your keynote presentation that was sort of being delivered, a couple of us were sort of thinking, oh, really interesting, because we maybe in the career sector don't always hear so much from people in your kind of particular role. But also there might be perhaps slightly a stereotype around when it comes to kind of economic analysts, that sort of big data, big picture, what does it mean for us type thing. And what was really interesting about your presentation and the research I know we're going to be talking about today is that it does drill down to that level and looks at, you know, the realities. How does this actually affect the region and how might it affect people and businesses, and not just kind of pure data? And I know you really wanted to emphasize that in the presentation you gave. So I guess a really good starting point for any of our viewers is, you know, if they've not yet come across the emergent markets work, the evidence-based Northeast Evidence Hub, tell us a little bit more, I guess, around why that was created and I guess what it does in terms of building that picture of what's happening in industry in the region.
Sure. So the work we've done on emerging markets is essentially our forward-looking work. So like you say, we spend a lot of time looking at various different economic statistics on the number of jobs in different sectors, etc. But that can only really take you so far when you're trying to do careers provision, because basically you need to have a bit of a sense of what might be coming down the track. So this is our attempt to understand, where do we think there are going to be opportunities in the Northeast region over a 10 to 15 year time period? Now, how do we do that? Well, I mean, obviously that's very difficult, and there's always an element of uncertainty around understanding what the future might bring. But what we did was we focused in particular on global trends. So we went out and we tried to identify as many economic, social, technological trends as we could find that we think are going to be driving changes in economic opportunities over a 10 to 15 year time period. And then we said, okay, so now we've identified those trends, where do we think they're going to drive growth in markets that are relevant to the Northeast? So to give a relatively simple example, I mean, one of the big global trends that's relatively easier to identify is global warming, climate change, the responses we need to do to get to net zero. What might that mean for markets and sector opportunities in the region? Well, one of the things that we have a strong manufacturing base in is electric vehicles. We've currently got the only electric battery plants in the country. And so we think we can be reasonably confident in saying, okay, we've seen this global trend. We think it's going to continue to drive market growth, and we have a sector that we think is going to have opportunities within that. So that's what we were trying to do, and we ended up with a list of about 17 different sectors that we think are reasonable chances for growth in the Northeast based on what we know about these global trends. Again, it's not perfect, but that's what we're trying to do, is to give a bit of a better sense on that.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of sort of taking that and applying it, you mentioned there about kind of careers provision, that often what you need is you need the context, and you often need stuff that's kind of quite operational in a sense, in terms of if we're working with clients, or if, for example, people are delivering these kind of types of talks or providing labour market information maybe to students or young people. There kind of needs to be a sense of, like, how could this actually apply for me in the real world? So I guess what was the kind of what have some of the applications or some of the intended applications been behind that kind of the research itself, in terms of how you've shared it, and then maybe how you're seeing people using it in the Northeast?
Yeah, so I mean, we wanted to get this out there, and again, what we wanted to do was give people a reasonable understanding of what could be coming down the track, so they can start to make decisions. And part of that was on the business side of things. So I mean, one way the research has been used is businesses have been using it to understand what markets they might want to focus on in the future. I think from a careers perspective, I think there are two main potential ways that it could be used. I mean, the first is we have this list of 17 markets, which we say there might be opportunities in the future. And if you're someone who's maybe thinking about what qualifications you want to go into, or trying to, decide what occupation you want to do as your first job, I think it gives you a bit of a sense of where there might be growth. But I think more than that, because, these 17 markets, they're suggestions for what might be coming. I think deeper than that is the trends analysis itself, because it gets you a sense of how are things like technology and the way the economy has changed and net zero going to change what it means to be a working professional in itself. I mean, some of the more obvious examples around that are in the AI areas. That's a trend that we identified, something that's definitely going to change the way people work. And on the one hand, that might drive particular opportunities in computing and digital technologies. But on the other hand, it means we have to think about the kind of skills we want to develop that will be useful in markets across sectors as they go forward. So I think those are the two main ways that, from a careers perspective, the emerging markets work can be used.
Yeah, it's interesting, because thinking about sort of entrepreneurialism, which is something that's getting, I would say, probably a bit more airtime now across the career sector than maybe it used to. Again, people may sort of agree or disagree, but certainly kind of in the higher education career sector, we're seeing a lot more focus now on careers teams being responsible for entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism than perhaps there used to be, which I think is absolutely right. And I guess this kind of speaks to some of the stuff you're talking about, that actually, as a young person or somebody maybe at the start of your career, or even looking to change career, seeing kind of maybe what's coming down the pipeline, or where there might be gaps in the market or opportunities, I guess allows you to potentially exert some of that creativity if that's an area that you're interested in self-employment, freelancing, entrepreneurship.
100%. And I think one of the findings from the study overall as well is just how much these sectors and trends are starting to interact in the future as well, which I think gives a lot of scope for creative, almost creating your own path, but at the very least, thinking about how these technologies are going to interact with different trends, and thinking about some of the sectors we identified are going to interact with themselves as well. I think if you're thinking about where you might want to make a career, I think being able to go across a couple of different sectors or a couple of different trends is quite a powerful way to do that, because then you're working in a new entrepreneurial area.
And it speaks, I guess, as well to kind of, again, increased focus we're seeing on interdisciplinary kind of mastery or interdisciplinary project work, and this idea, I guess, of the world becoming a project economy with more transdisciplinary stuff rather than simply kind of, linear set-aside career pathways, which, some would maybe argue is going to be the case for a long time, but certainly getting more focus now. So it's really interesting. Sabiha, I think you wanted to come in there and with any comments or anything else to kind of add so far.
I did. Thank you. Honestly, I'm actually, to be fair, I'm trying to sit back and absorb what Thomas is sharing, because some of the information is just so innovative, because I'm not based physically there. And perhaps you, the viewer, are listening and thinking about, oh, okay, what will that mean for my region? Because I'm not based in the region that Thomas is. And so is there other similar types of practice? That's what's been going through my head. But I'd love to hear from you, the viewers. What are you thinking about? What's resonating with you today as you hear our guest speaker, Thomas, talk about his area of expertise and the work that he has been doing, over the last few years, and what that means and what that looks like in terms of transformation? I guess some of the questions that I had that I'd be keen to kind of explore and deep dive a little bit further into detail, okay, Thomas, is that for our viewers who are feeling maybe a little bit curious and inspired now because of hearing this, this lunchtime about emergent markets in their own parts of the country, do you have any recommendations of how a career professional could go about feeding that curiosity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have a few. So the first one is, yes, the research that we've done is Northeast specific, but actually a lot of it has global or national implications as well, particularly the trends analysis that I was talking about. I mean, a lot of these trends aren't just going to be affecting the Northeast, something like AI, climate change, development of technology. That's all relevant for everyone in the UK. So, and at the Northeast Lab, we do have a commitment wherever possible to publish our evidence on the internet. So if you go to the Northeast Evidence Hub, which is where we publish all of our evidence and findings, you can go onto our emerging markets page and you can yourself look at the different trends and the markets that I identified and think about how they might apply in your own region. So certainly a lot of the research that we've done is applicable outside the Northeast as well. Beyond that, I mean, so we are the Northeast Local Enterprise Partnership, but there are local enterprise partnerships in all parts of England, and they all have their own responsibility to develop their own evidence bases on strengths and weaknesses in different regions. So I would very much encourage people to contact them to understand what they see as the trends and the markets that are driving growth in their own areas. And then my last recommendation is that there are some really good government sources on this as well. So there's been a unit set up in the DfE recently called the Unit for Future Skills. And they're very much trying to grapple with the same kind of questions that I've just been talking about. And there are two things that they've published recently, which I think are really relevant. So one is they just released a report in November on how AI is going to impact jobs and occupations in the UK. It's a really interesting read, and we're trying to do our own analysis to apply it to the Northeast region at the moment. And they also have a data dashboard that is very helpful. And in particular, they've got a data set there where they are showing the different pathways that people have gone through particular qualifications to end up in particular sectors. And I just think it's a fantastic dashboard for understanding the potential kinds of routes that people can go through. And really speaks to the findings that we got as well, because one of the main findings is just that this sheer variety of qualification routes you can use to get into different sectors. And again, I think that speaks to that point to careers not particularly linear, and probably especially going to be less linear in the future.
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
really interesting. Sorry, Sabiha, I was just going to say the AI report, particularly from Unit for Future Skills, is really worth looking at because it kind of bucks the trend compared to some of the other reports in that it talks more about exposure to AI. So rather than kind of like displacement, a lot of the big kind of meta reports, I guess you could call them, Gallup or Gartner or PwC, any of those kind of future of job ones, you tend to find that there's a lot of stuff around predictions on displacement, which jobs might go, what jobs might be created. The nice thing about the Future Skills one, it's all about exposure. So actually you see some jobs things that you might not expect. So kind of teaching, psychology, even kind of some of the STEM professions, where actually they're talking about the level of exposure being really high, but it not necessarily meaning that those jobs will be taken away. So I think it's a slightly more kind of like nuanced report, but there's still a lot of kind of people diving into that in terms of what the implications might be. So yeah, really useful if you have a chance to check that out.
Some great comments there, Chris, about what you're sharing, and I just wanted to sort of bring Thomas in to say, Thomas, from like, I almost feel as if the job that you are doing is very much like kind of crystal ball, like Mystic Meg type, but with science to back it, almost like with the science to back it, because you're thinking about, okay, what do we need to be thinking about? And I guess sort of what aspects of your job has allowed you to really sort of understand the world of work, and how, you know, I'd be curious to hear you sort of kind of share that experience, and how that can translate for career professionals. How can, you know, career professionals take what you've done? Because I know a lot of career professionals, many of them are watching now, and many watch on the playback because they're time poor, they don't have the time. You know, what lunch break? I hear people say, because when I say, oh, you should watch the show at your lunch time, they're like, we don't have time, it's a working lunch. So how can career professionals take your experience and knowledge and sort of really sort of make it a part of their sort of day-to-day sort of practice as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, and I feel like in my job, I'm always trying to draw a fine line between wanting to give people confidence in the kind of evidence that we produce, and also really needing to acknowledge that in economics, everything is always uncertain and the data is never perfect. I think the best way to grapple with that is a combination of going to the sources, going to the data when you can. And I appreciate that's very difficult when you're very busy, but I think you always need that kind of quantitative underpinning to understand the big picture trends. But then equally, where you can, just talking to people and businesses, you know, there are particularly when it comes to future trends, there's a limit to what you can get from reading and reports and looking at data. But if you speak to a business that's working in a particular sector, they're probably very aware of it, and they'll be the ones who are innovating and starting to use the technology in new innovative ways. So I think the best approach is just a combination of getting that hard quantitative data to give you that big picture, and then talking to people, because people can tell you things more quickly than you'll see in that.
I think that's so true. Thinking about sort of the institution I work for, I remember sort of right at the beginning of the year, our kind of enterprise team had brought somebody in specifically to look at kind of impact of generative AI, and it was interesting talking to him about the SMEs locally in the area where I work. Already kind of looking at how it could kind of fill gaps where maybe they were struggling to recruit or kind of give productivity gains, and as you say, moving probably much quicker maybe than some sort of larger institutions were. So really interesting. And I noticed actually in the comments in the chat, I think a couple of things you mentioned there speaks to the comment from a Facebook user, which mentions about assessing for a kind of quality award in a primary school. Lots of young people have been really interested in discussing the impact of technology, maybe on the world and on the world of work. So I think, as you were kind of saying there, there's almost an implication from a careers education perspective of kind of encouraging that curiosity in how is the world changing? You know, what might that look like? Some of it is big picture, yes, but some of it's also what's happening around us and what does that look like? So yeah, really interesting.
And I really love, Thomas, what you're saying there as well, sort of kind of bringing in what you but what both essentially Chris is also echoing as well, which is that you need to get out, don't you? You need to sort of kind of almost hit the pavement and find out what's happening in your local area. So whatever community that you're serving, so whether that's a primary context, which is, you know, our lovely Facebook user has just shared with us, or perhaps you're working with, you know, women returning back to the workforce after having a baby, or maybe it's somebody that had a career but is now in the later stage of their career and is thinking about, oh, what could I do next? What would that look like? Or maybe you're working in an educational setting and you have perhaps maybe international students. So what does that look like? And I love the fact that, you know, you're so emphasizing, Thomas, that have the sort of qualitative, you know, sort of data to sort of underpinning your practice, but then get out there and find out, you know, who are the community, the people that you are serving, where are they going to go to? Because location, you know, is going to have an impact. You know, if people are not looking to travel more than 10, 20, 30 miles from where they currently reside for a job opportunity. Well, what's that landscape looking like for people? Because there's no point sort of saying to your client, oh yeah, go be an astronaut, where actually where they live, there's no such opportunity for that career progression unless they're planning to move elsewhere to, and I know I'm giving an extreme example, but, there are some areas where you work and operate where there is limitations. And I know that we are sort of kind of slowly sort of running out of time as we wrap up today's show. So, I mean, I guess final thoughts, Thomas, that you'd like to leave with our viewers. If there was any sort of key message that you'd like to leave with our viewers today, what would that be and why?
I mean, I think for me, the really key message that comes out of the emerging markets work, and it is relatively Northeast specific, but it's just that there are these opportunities that are coming down the line. I think, particularly where we are, we're a region that has had economic challenges in lots of different ways, but I think we can also be quite confident that there are these trends out there that are going to be driving growth in the future, and we do have particular sectoral strengths in the region that means we can get onto those opportunities, and of course other regions in the UK do that as well. So I think one of the main things I just wanted to get out of is just a bit of excitement from a careers perspective. There have been so many challenges in the Northeast, and I'm sure there will be ones in the future, but there are also opportunities that we'll be able to capture there.
Excellent.
That's great. I think looking at what someone's just mentioned in the chat as well, so kind of Heather McRae's just talked about this idea of kind of place-based careers advising being quite useful. Obviously, naturally as careers professionals, we will explore everything, and potentially we might kind of challenge and help clients kind of think, are there opportunities that are outside their kind of frame of reference they haven't thought about? But I think, Sabiha's points, they're absolutely spot on. We certainly see it when it comes to kind of the higher education sector, that 2/3 of individuals, 2/3 of graduates either end up kind of living and working in the place where they grew up, or returning to the place they grew up after kind of complete university. So it's a big percentage. We know that place is a really important part of kind of people's career development decisions. And I think what you're mentioning there is spot on, as you say, not just for the Northeast, but of course we're kind of, we're seeing it elsewhere, particularly, I guess, as some of these devolution deals are coming. And in the West Midlands, for example, that there have been rumours that they are taking back control, to coin a phrase that no one particularly enjoys, of their careers services within the West Midlands. So I don't know how that's kind of progressing, if we've got any viewers from the West Midlands, but I think all of this ties into a lot of what you're saying about that importance of place and kind of understanding opportunities that might emerge. So a huge thank you again for sort of joining us today. Again, we've got on the screen, you should see in front of you right now, if you want to find out more about kind of Thomas's work, lots of information on his LinkedIn page, but also we've been flashing up the Emergent Markets Research Hub as well. So do kind of check that on there, the Northeast Evidence Hub. Have a look at the research. We've also been sharing the Unit for Future Skills links, so do have a look at those too. But yeah, Thomas, massive thank you for being our final guest of 2023, and wish you all the best with all the other projects you've got on the go at the moment.
No, thank you so much for having me here. It's been an absolute pleasure, and as I say, I always love getting out to talk about economics and research, so very happy to come on.
Oh, thank you for that, Thomas. Exactly, it was fun to have you on here, and you can see sort of, I think, from Chris and I, that we're very much in sort of our festive mode, aren't we, Chris? We've got our kind of Christmas t-shirts and jumpers on as we head into, and are you sort of is anybody else here watching today feeling festive and kind of getting into the Christmas cheers spirit? Let us know in the chat. And so now it's that time of the show where we're going to do the latest news stories from the CDI and the wider careers, guidance, information and advice sector. Now, my first story, I picked a couple of good ones, I think, and I hope you agree too. So the first story is the new CDI website is live. Now, what I will share is that there are a few sort of technical glitches. So if you perhaps maybe going on and finding information not where you think it should be, or perhaps maybe there are sort of kind of few technical issues that you are experiencing, the CDI are aware of this. However, what you can do to help them is whatever sort of kind of issues that you are experiencing or you're noticing elsewhere on the website, can you send them an email at digital@thecdi.net, so that way then they can become aware of it and then obviously get their IT boffins on there to sort of kind of fix the problem and fix the glitches. And then the next CDI story that I have is, it's sort of a little bit sad, but sort of kind of also a little bit of joy, because our kind of existing president, Caroline Perry, has now stepped aside, and we now welcome Pete Robertson, who is our now new CDI president. Now, for those of you that don't know Pete, or maybe haven't come across him, or maybe you have come across Pete before, but you're not really sure what it is that he's intending to do, I do have a little bit of information about what sort of kind of Pete intends to work on and focus on whilst he is president. And I know that he's pledged to focus on addressing 2 long-term strategic weaknesses in the career development profession as part of his 2025 strategy. And do you agree with him? If you do, let us know in the chat box. And if you don't, maybe you think his focus should be elsewhere, again, join in. This is the kind of interaction and feedback that we look for from the show. So his first sort of kind of area that he's going to be focused on is going to be the lack of accessible evidence base to guide practitioners and service sort of leaders that can support them in influencing the changes with policymakers, funding bodies, and key stakeholders. And really kind of resonating with what Thomas has been talking about here today. And Pete really wants to see the CDI act as a bridge between research, policy, and practice, such as sort of making evidence summaries more accessible to members as well. And then secondly, the second area that Pete is going to be focused on is the fragmentation that we see in the profession. And he will be working with the CDI team to simplify and harmonise the qualification frameworks as part of the strengthening standards pillar of the strategy, as well as sort of kind of broadening the CDI membership by reaching out further into professional communities. And so those are going to be sort of some of the areas that Pete is going to be focused on. And as I say, joining the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. And then finally, I just want to bring people's attention to the CDI mentoring scheme. It is back. Now, the deadline to become a mentor has passed, because that was on the 8th of December. However, I just wanted to sort of kind of remind people and let people know that it is coming up. So for anybody who's thinking, oh God, I could really do with a mentor, or perhaps maybe your career, you've been in the sector for some time and your career's hit a bit of a slump and you're in need of some inspiration, the mentorship is a great way. So look out for, in January, you will be receiving sort of kind of emails and notifications about that. So that wraps up my CDI sort of kind of stories for this season and this year. Chris, what have you got for us for the final story?
Thanks, Sabiha. So just before that, I'll just pick up what kind of Facebook users asked in terms of those comments about the West Midlands. So essentially, when the West Midlands devolution deal was announced earlier this year, I believe, one of the things that was kind of mooted was the West Midlands taking back basically complete control of how they provided careers services. So whether that would be almost like a localized version of connections. A lot of detail not particularly clear at that time. I don't know whether anything's progressed on that front. So if you're a West Midlands based careers professional and things have completely changed since that happened, then do let us know. But yeah, it looked like it was kind of an interesting maybe precedent that possibly with other devolution deals, would we see the same sort of thing happening, and what might that look like if it did? So yeah, there's, if you kind of Google West Midlands devolution deal, there's information in there, but I'd say a little bit light on detail at the moment from when I last looked. So I hope that clears that up. And then, yeah, in terms of our news story, so really it's kind of all, I guess, about wrap-ups, reflections, looking ahead at this time of year, always very similar. So the first one I want to start with is a shout out to Lucy Sattler. So Lucy, again, well known now to the UK career development community, but Australian-based careers professional and kind of founder of Study Work Grow. And she's been kind of sharing her sort of resource wrap-ups for 2023. So really nice LinkedIn post, kind of surfacing her sort of top 5 career theories, career models, books, recommendations from this year. Really nicely kind of illustrated through Canva as well. So do check those out if you haven't already. My second one is, again, a little bit of a look ahead. So again, a number of people may have seen this report already from the Houses of Parliament, all about kind of the 11 to 16 secondary education system, some quite damning reports about, what the education system looks like now, whether it's fit for purpose in the modern world. But as many careers professionals have pointed out, that particular report doesn't necessarily have a huge amount of actionable sort of recommendations. Lots of recommendations about what's not going so well, lots of things that link into kind of the careers profession, certainly around like the curriculum and whether it's kind of too heavily academic focused, but not a huge amount in terms of detail about what might happen next. But this is quite an interesting thing to keep an eye on, because it ties in with some of the stuff that came back from the Education Select Committee, reports into career guidance earlier in the year. And of course, we've got the Westminster Forum coming up in January, which David Morgan, the CDI Chief Executive, will be attending, on the future of career guidance in schools. And that's based down at the House of Lords. So there's an awful lot of stuff going on at the moment in this area. It's really kind of good idea to kind of keep up to date with it. And our final news story, very much linked into some of the stuff that Thomas has been talking about today. So really interesting article in The Economist on this idea of macro trends for 2024. Spans a huge range of different industries. So it covers everything from kind of healthcare through to agriculture, climate change, technology, but looking at it very much from the global perspective. So again, not quite something you can use to sort of drill down into the local details, particularly for the UK, but quite good for looking at those kind of general emerging trends that Thomas talked about earlier, and how those might kind of impact our own context. So yeah, do check those out. Those are our kind of final news stories for 2023, and all that really remains left to be said is a massive thank you for joining us this year. We hope you've enjoyed the 2023 seasons of We Are Careers. We will be back in 2024. Stay tuned to kind of our social channels, the CDI social channels, for updates. We'll let you know kind of what the plans will be. But until then, have a wonderful kind of Christmas period, however you celebrate it. A fantastic new year, and we will see you all in 2024. Take care. See you soon.
We will do. And thank you, Joyce Dixon, for having her Santa hat on while she was watching the show. See you next year, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you soon.